It gets clicks online.
Lot of eyeballs. I mean, if that's all you care about is eyeballs, then people to get riled up about stuff and share
if you want views,
and repost.
be controversial. That's the way to go.
So this to me was the very first time last week. It was the very first time that I felt like I was having like vivid flashbacks of COVID.
Because we were online.
Yeah. Watching and then like going through and editing worship and putting it together. Mm-hmm. I was just like, I was occasionally going like, oh my gosh, what year is it?
Yeah. When we recorded the video, because I mean, obviously we, do video every week, but we're talking to each other and that's different. And looking into a camera to preach a sermon is weird. And a camera is oddly, like I have no problem being recorded really in general, just I had to get used to it for COVID. But like this sermons on Sunday are recorded, like anything where like you're being recorded for content, that's not a big deal. But like prolonged where you're just looking directly into a camera is weird because there's no human interaction and it's odd. So yeah, I had the same feeling when we were recording it as I was like, man, I remember not enjoying this, having to do it every single week. And it was really tough.
There's benefits to it. I mean, you can do things in that environment that you can't do in the real environment. You can do all these like visual things. You can add graphics that, and then you can like refer to. I don't know. There's a lot of advantages to it.
Well, it cuts down on mistakes. I mean, if you have a bad transition, you can change that. Yeah. If you have a bad take, do it again. I mean,
fix it in post.
You can ensure that all those little things, that when it's live, it's live. You got to deal with what you got to deal with. But it just, I don't know. The conversation around digital ministry and that was already happening before the pandemic hit, but it really, dramatically increased and forced a lot of churches that had no interest or had never thought about doing it before to now have to think about it. And so I think in some ways it's great. I think in some ways it was necessary for the time, but some of those needed to die. And I think that it's a conversation that I'm interested to see where it goes because it gets complicated when you get into like, is it really... how much community can you have online? And I mean, there's a lot of conversation around that in parenting when you've got kids playing online games and they have developed all these relationships online with people they've never actually met. Is that good or bad? Is it both? I mean, it's kind of a complicated question. And then you get into even more complications where you're talking about like the sacraments. Like, can you do communion online?
Well, the official stance during COVID was... for the North, because we were still the North Texas conference back then, the official stance was that it was kind of, no, you can't do communion via online worship. I feel like I remember that, but a lot of churches did it anyway.
Yeah, it went back and forth. For a while, there really were no rules. And so we would tell people, I remember when it first started, we would say, now make sure on the first Sunday, like gather whatever you're going to use for communion at home.
Yeah, we did that at the church I was at.
Yeah. And then for a while, they were like, now I think it's whenever we were able to come back for like outdoor communion or something. It was a lot of precaution because it was food. So even when we could come back, you couldn't distance and they were worried about it anyway. Then you got into a lot of theological conversations around like, is it really sanctified if you get sick from it? Which is a funny conversation. Like if you get food poisoning from communion elements, like how is God's presence there? And then you get into a real fun conversation around like, well, what do you believe is happening during communion? So it's because denominations are all over the place. And so anyway, it's a tricky conversation. And I am thankful that for the most part, we don't have to have this conversation anymore, because this was everything we talked about every week was how can we do it? What should we do? Is anybody paying attention? Should we be doing this? Should we change? And once we were able to come back, do you just drop everything you were doing? Yeah, it was. I was having some rough flashbacks as well, especially on Sunday when I logged on to watch it. And I was like, this is the thing that as much as it was painful to have to do the recordings, at least you were actively doing something. Watching it on Sunday morning where you're just like sitting at home, and I've been going to church on Sunday mornings my entire life.
Yeah.
And so sitting at home was weird already. And then like trying to connect with people where I'm watching myself, so I already know what I'm going to say, but I can't see anyone else. I really hated that part. So
I mean, it took me a very long time to get used to the sound of my own voice. I've been editing myself singing or talking now for so long, so many years. I'm pretty used to it. And whether I like it or not, it doesn't change the fact that like I hear it differently in my own head, but I also know when I hear my own voice in recording, because so many people, when they hear their voice for the first time,
they don't like
they're
it.
like, that is not me. I'm like,
yeah,
sorry.
that is you.
So you.
It definitely is.
It took a while to get used to it, but I don't know. There was this, all of those flashbacks, but it was also like, I get to like really like string this thing and make it fun and like challenge myself to make it the best thing that it could possibly be for what it is. And it was also since as far as I'm aware, that's the most people that we've had on our live stream ever. So that's cool.
Yeah. I mean, we had like 90 some people at one point watching it.
And that was like during the actual
During
live stream.
Yeah. I went back and looked, like, I think we've got maybe 160 views over a minute. Even just in like that first day.
I think it's more than that now. Because last time I looked, it was.
I mean, by now it definitely is. But even just in that one day, that's crazy. A lot.
It was good. Of all the things, like you're stuck inside, so it was fun to kind of relive that, but knowing that, hey, we don't have to do this again.
Yes.
It's just kind of
and the other funny thing is I watched a lot of other churches. I know you did too. That normally I don't. I mean, I'll watch if my friend's preaching or if some big thing is happening, like yesterday or this past Sunday. Paul Rasmussen at Highland Park. It was his last day. I heard. So I watched some of that. And
they also announced that Matt Gaston's retiring.
And so, but like Paul's like retirement was so anticipated this last day, and they were like lines around the block and everything. So like things like that, like I'll check in. But normally I'm not watching other churches, especially on a Sunday, and fewer churches are doing live streaming. And so, but during the pandemic, I was watching them all because you're online, you're already there, everybody's live. I'm curious to see what people are doing. I want to be inspired by some. I want to feel better that ours is better than others because like
that's the
our
thing.
production value was so low, but I was like, at least we're not that anymore. So, and that's, I started to feel bad. I was like, I shouldn't be doing this, but it was nice to know that, hey, at least we're doing a little bit better than we were. And I'm glad all that time is done, but it was interesting because this Sunday was a little like, oh, okay, wow, I wonder why they did that. Oh, I wonder why they did that. And I saw live stream lengths anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour and a half, and that cracks me up too. Like the length. There's just so many decisions you have to make when you're doing it online. So I'm glad it's over.
I mean, I'm very, very glad though that we were clearly the best one. So if you haven't watched that live stream, go give it a check out. It's pretty fantastic.
That's right.
So that was this last Sunday. Yesterday was fantastic. Like,
it's huge.
Not only was the combined worship, every time we do that, it is so much fun because it's just a different feel than what we're used to, and getting a choir that's part of the worship, modern worship sound. And it's just, and we got nothing but high praise about all of it. The choir was having fun. People were just like, this is amazing. And it's a packed house and just, there's a different energy, but getting the DS and our leadership chair and just getting to burn the note, that was cool.
It was fun. And I'm glad it all worked out because when the winter storm hit, we had to shift the schedule of everything because we weren't supposed to do that combination of things, but it still would have been a big Sunday. no matter what, because we pushed communion. Like typically yesterday would have been a communion Sunday, but we pushed it until next week because there's no way we could have. We already went long, even though we tried to make everything as tight as we could.
Yeah, we ended up like 12:20 almost, or 12.
I don't think it was quite that long, but yeah, it was 10 or 15 minutes over. But it would have been an hour and a half if we had communion with it too. So anyway, I'm glad that we were able to adjust it and still have the chili cook off, and all of it worked out well. And the weather was a little chilly, but it was good.
Oh yeah,
which is, you kind of want cold weather for chili. So that was nice. And then this coming Sunday, it's supposed to be like 70 degrees or something, but it was fun. So this is the second time that I burned a note, and I did one at my last church, and those have been some of the most fun moments, just because it sounds like not a big deal at the time. Like, oh, like we're making debt payment. Now we're not making a debt payment. Like nothing, I don't want to say nothing happens, but like, it's not like the church is different. It's not like you come in one day and there's a thing. It's just that we're done paying this. But when you really stop to think of like what all that represents and what all was done to get there, it can be easy to forget that, because the last capital campaign we had was for phase 2, which would have been like, 10 years ago. And so there's been so much time, and the pandemic was in the middle of that. Like everything has come up in the middle of all that it can be hard to stretch your memory back to, or people weren't here to know anything about it. And so I think getting to kind of relive some of those moments and look through, where we have come from and what we've gone through and who all was here during those different stages. But yeah, and I like that that's built into our like book of worship. There's like a burning of the notes ceremony that's like scripted out. We didn't do exactly that one. We always make it our own, but, I like that that's a mechanism that's built into our church culture, denominationally, because I think it's important to celebrate milestones.
Yeah.
And it's especially at a church like Creekwood, where we're always looking forward. We're always setting goals and moving forward. We're in a fast-paced community. We're always trying to move forward. It can be easy to forget where you've come from.
Yeah.
And it can be easy to forget to celebrate accomplishments and milestones. A lot of times we'll put on these huge events. We did like Live Nativity or the Pumpkin Patch or these big things in the fall. And when they were over, it was a mixture of, all right, and thankfully, like just because it was exhausting. It was great, but it was exhausting. And so usually your only reaction to doing some big thing is a little bit of relief. And maybe like all right, we did that. Let's take some notes for next year. But you rarely like stop and celebrate it. And so I love this idea, and to do it dramatically with the DS here and to light it on fire and to have all this kind of liturgy and pomp and circumstance with it. I think it really honors it for what it is, when we easily could have just said, we're debt free now, woo, and then moved on.
Right. But so this now sets a precedent that what do we do next?
Definitely.
Because I assume you're going to be stopped in the hallway by a lot of our church members on Sundays, on weekdays when people are just here for some reason. Say, so what do we do now?
Oh, I've already gotten emails about it.
No, it's not surprising at all. So yeah. Now, what is the first thing on your mind, other than like the practical stuff? Like, well, let's check those air conditioners, and then
exactly,
and that's great. But something like maybe a ministry that you're like, what, we haven't really explored trying this, or what's something that you're passionate about that we haven't had a chance to try to explore here at this church that maybe you've done in the past, or what's just anything that you're like, what, I think we should do this.
So some of that is just taking stock of kind of what we care about and what we want to care about. And something that, to answer your question more directly, the thing that I'm passionate about is defining things and having kind of visions and identities that are easy to get behind and to measure and to know if you're doing well and expand. I think I know you and I've talked about this, but one of the struggles that I think a lot of Methodist churches have or fall victim to is they try to be everything to everyone. And when you're a mile wide, you can only be an inch deep. Like you can only push and fund so many things before the quality suffers. And that's where you get a lot of struggle. And I've been a part of churches where they're having like 6 fundraisers running concurrently because they have too many ministries and they're all struggling, and you just can't support them all. And so something I've done in a lot of the churches I've been a part of came from a mentor of mine, which is this idea of creating like a signature ministry or a missional identity where when somebody says, hey, don't you go to Creekwood? Hey, yeah, well, tell me about it. When you ask somebody that question, no matter what church they go to, hey, tell me about your church, the answer is almost always the same. They usually give you a list of the programs or ministries they offer. So people usually say, hey, tell me about your church. Oh, great. You know, I've been going there for like 5 years, and we worship on Sunday. We got 2 styles of worship. There's Sunday school in between. We have a youth program and a children's program, and we do some mission work.
That's describing almost every church.
That's every church. Exactly. So what makes Creekwood unique? What makes your church different? And so I think that's been a goal that I've had in the last few churches that I've pastored, is to try to help. And it's not me assigning one, it's me trying to help guide a conversation so that the church can mostly just name what they already do well and enjoy, and then look forward to what does the community need and what do we want to be about. And so I think that that's where you can find things that are way more inspirational to talk about why this church. Because when people say, hey, tell me about your church, they don't mean tell me about the concept of organized religion. Like they want to know specifically your church. Like what is
why are you unique? What do you do?
Exactly.
And I've worked at churches before where I'll say, oh, I work at this church, and then they say, wait, is that the church that does the thing? And it's like some high profile thing that you could typically like see from the street or something like that. Like for some people, I'm sure, are you that church that has like the big red barn up on the hill or whatever? Or are you that church that, you know, does the live nativity or something like that? There's a lot of higher profile things that we do that kind of invite the public in.
Right.
And so I don't know, for me, it just turns into a question of the people who are so deeply emotionally, financially, and physically invested in this place. Like, what do they want people to say when they're like, oh, Creekwood, aren't you that fill in the blank church?
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of it, again, is just looking at what you already do well. So the identity of the barn on the corner, the identity of some of these signature events we already do and have established in the community is the obvious place to start a lot of these conversations. But like at my last church, for example, we didn't really have an identity or a missional identity or a vision. And so the mission team kind of came together and looked at what they were doing, and all the programs really had to do with food. It was food pantries and food drives. And so we were like, okay, well, what if we, instead of picking one thing to be about, what if we kind of created an umbrella of our missional identity will be about food or food drives or feeding people. And somebody, and like, that's what I mean by it. Like, I'm not the one who comes up with this. It wasn't even me. There was a member in the church who said, well, what if we called it Feed 5,000 because of the story of the feeding of the 5,000 in scripture? And I had just preached a sermon on it a few weeks ago where one of the things in one of the stories, they're all a little different. That's one of the stories that I'm pretty sure that's one of the ones that's in all 4 gospels. And in one of the versions, the disciples come to Jesus and say, we got to give these people some food. Like, we've got to let them go so they can go get dinner. Like, it's getting late. They're getting hungry. And Jesus turns to the disciples and says, they don't need to go anywhere. You give them something to eat. And the disciples are like, what? There's like 20,000 people here. Like, how? Because 5,000 is only the men. So when you count women and children, they're like, how? There's 12 of us. How are we supposed to feed 10,000 people? And so I like that idea of it follows in all these commands that Christ is often offering of trying to get us or the disciples to take on the ministry and not just rely on Jesus doing everything for them.
Right.
And so that a combination of that being one of the elements I loved about the story, and this member bringing up like, hey, what if we called it this because it has scriptural basis? So we created this new missional identity called Feed 5,000, and we set a goal every year to feed 5,000 people. So I was trying to tell the church, like when somebody says, hey, don't you go to that church down the street? Don't list the things we do. When they say, hey, what's your church like or what's your church about? Say, we try to feed 5,000 people every year. Because that's not a typical answer. And that's pretty unique. That invites somebody into a conversation. They're like, wait, what do you mean? I don't why do you feed? Why did you do that? I want to know more. Oh yeah. Well, do you guys also do? Yeah. I mean, we also have youth and children and all these other things. And those are the things that really make up the core of who our ministry is, so that we can do this. Like, we come together. So in Creekwood language, it would be, we grow the deep roots to share God's love. Yep. You have to have the roots and the connection to be able to then go and serve. And so I think that's my hope, is trying to figure out, how can we talk about Creekwood in a way that invites people into a deeper conversation, or is appealing, or sounds provocative and interesting, and I want to come check that out. Because it can't just be, well, we have church and youth and Sunday school. They get that anywhere.
Right.
So what is it? Is it something about the way we connect with and care for the community? Is it something about the way we do ministry? Do we focus on families, or do we focus on helping people who are going through a difficult time? Like, what is it that we really, and it's not that it limits you in the sense that that's all you do, but you want to have something that everybody can say, something that everybody can be a part of at any level. Because you can't just say, we have the best
children's
choir in town. We have the choir, whatever. You can't just name one thing, because if that's not you, you're like, well, okay,
I can't really participate in this thing, even though it's the identity of the church.
I don't have kids, so that's nice, but maybe I'll check somewhere else out. So it's got to be something that's accessible to everybody and invites people to want to come, because that works for evangelism and marketing and communications and worship and preaching and all these things. But it also then gives your church a clear idea of who you are and what you're trying to do. If we want to have an impact in the community, what is that impact? And then you kind of work backwards from there. And a lot of times we do it the other way around. We start with creating programs or trying to come up with things to put money towards.
Yeah, then you hope one of them clicks really well, and then everybody decides, oh yeah, we do like that.
You hope it turns into like a passion, but that's backwards. And so we're trying to start with, why do we exist? What kind of an impact do we want to have? And then start to work out, okay, how would we go about doing that?
Right.
And then what does that need to look like from a tangible budget, staffing, committee, programmatic standpoint, and kind of work our way backwards from there. So that's a lot of what we're looking at. And that's also going to help when we talk about, okay, we've paid off debt. The logical assumption everyone makes is we're about to go back into debt. We're going to build something new, or we're going to renovate something. And there's truth to that, because you have to maintain property. And if your church is growing, you want it to grow. Adding phase 2 was one of the best things we did.
Oh, absolutely.
It expanded our ministry capability tenfold. It created so much excitement. So, debt isn't fun, but it can be good if it leverages you into an exciting future.
Through this process, I got to see some of those pictures that we were looking at on Sunday. And I actually got to see the original floor plan for this building we're in, and what the original purpose for some of these rooms were. This room was a nursery.
Yeah. There's like speakers in it so you can hear worship.
Yeah. And like some of that, and I didn't know that. I was like, oh, because when I got here, this was the de facto choir robe storage room.
Oh, yeah.
And this is where the choir...
the number of times things have changed are crazy. So
there used to be a sink right where you're sitting.
Nice.
And it just really wasn't that long ago that we changed all these things. And now we're in this position of, okay, well, it's all paid off. So what do we do?
Yeah, and it's great timing, because we've talked about this already, but like we're coming up to the 20-year lifespan of all the phase 1 parts of the building that are going to need some love and updates, and that has a real impact.
Oh, for sure. Like the amount of things that so here's a good example. Before you were here, one of the last things that happened while David was still here is we got new projectors and new projector screens. The old projectors were so bad, and because we have a very, very naturally bright worship center. There's a lot of windows, and we get slammed with sun, especially during the summer.
Yeah.
And you legitimately could not see anything that was above a certain brightness on the screens. And I was editing like certain videos and certain slides purely so that the contrast was so aggressive that it would show up and on the screens. And I would have to do multiple edits for certain videos, so that, because if you watched it all like on your phone or your laptop, it would just look like this black blob.
Yeah.
But then if you watch the normal one on the screens, it was just so washed out you couldn't see anything because it was so bright in there. It had to be like pitch black in there. And so the amount of a difference that just those made, and that wasn't that ridiculous of a project, but I'm like, oh my gosh, imagine what we can do when we do this and this and like little things that we think are little things, because what we have now is technically functional, but like just upgrading those little things. I agree with you. The practical stuff is kind of boring, but man, the difference it can make.
It has a big impact. And we did a little bit of this. The campaign I did at my last church was a lot of deferred maintenance and some updates to the building. It wasn't any massive building, construction campaign, but there were little things like our AC started to go out. It was actually a blessing. It started to break and go out over the summer right before we had the campaign. So selling somebody on the idea of replacing an air conditioning unit is really hard to do, because they're like, well, it works. Why do you replace it? Well, when it stops working and it's 100 degrees outside, everyone's like, we have to fix this now. So
I mean, deferred maintenance is one of the most attractive sentences.
Oh, it's so excited. It's one step above debt management.
You guys want to talk about deferred maintenance?
At least we don't have any, debt relief to deal in. But I was talking to Brock and I was like, so before we do the campaign, we got to turn the AC off on some of those hot days and tell everyone it's broken so that we can I'm just kidding. But anyway, we had a lot of people who really cared about that, because they were like, we understand that. We've done that in our own homes. You have to do that or you're going to have real problems. But there's also real tangible ways. We talk about the projector screens in the sanctuary, but the sound system, some of the lighting, the chairs, some of the carpet stained, you can see some real benefits on day one for updates. And moving beyond that. So all to say, those are the fun things. Everybody loves getting behind, creating something new, updating something, creating new fun spaces. Everyone enjoys that to an extent. I mean, depending on how expensive it's going to be, but that's fun. The problem is it's so tempting to jump straight to that. And that's really what I think. And we're going to be having some of these conversations just because construction conversations and mechanical and maintenance conversations are long, and you have to do some of that legwork before. But I think when it comes to outside of deferred maintenance or obvious updates, anything that's going to be new or expanded upon or updated you have a lot of ways you could update it way, I want to postpone the decisions on those until after we know those initial questions of what impact are we trying to make in the community? What does that look like? Because then we should make our property allow us to fulfill that vision in the most effective way. And this is where a lot of times you get kind of hamstrung in the way you're trying to do things, because you put the cart before the horse. You put the building before the purpose of the building.
Right.
And I've got friends who work in churches where essentially there were whole buildings built with why was this built? And it's we thought it would be cool to have a room like this. And it was like, but for what? And they're like, we didn't really know. We just thought we need a room of this size. And they use it. There's a couple of churches where you'll see kind of a random, or you're like, you have a sanctuary and a worship space and a chapel and a stage in the gym. But you have
use
one worship service.
Yeah.
Why do you have 5 worship spaces? Well, throughout the history of the church, there were all these different ideas that came up. So I think that's where you want to really start with the purpose. And I mean, I'm a big fan of Simon Sinek. He's got this old classic TED Talk called Start With Why. You should watch it if you haven't. It's very old, but it's this idea that, his ultimate idea is that everybody if you work for a company, you probably know what your company does. You make microchips, you sell cars. You might know how you do that. You might know how they're made. You might know, maybe you don't have to, but maybe you do. You probably don't know why. Why does that company do what they do? And to make money is not a why. That's a result. That's a goal. So why? What's the purpose? Why'd you pick that? And the same is true in churches. And the why can be more ethereal in the sense of to make disciples for the transformation of the world. Great. Why here? Why in this way? Why does Creekwood exist? And a lot of churches, I had a great mentor who said, a lot of churches exist simply because they do. They feel like they have the right to exist because they do, but they're stagnant or they're dying. And if they died tomorrow, no one in the community would notice. And he worked in a lot in church development. He said, I think that churches should have to defend why they have the right to exist. And they should have momentum and vision and a purpose. Otherwise, they're just taking up space.
That's an aggressive way to pose that question.
It is.
Like, defend your right to exist. Yeah. That is intense.
The way it usually gets asked is...
Oh, I like that. I like the kind of just like, hey, convince me you should be here at all.
Well, when you only have so many resources to go around, that's one of the questions. But the way it usually gets asked is, if your church disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice?
Right.
Not your members, because they're obviously they come. But would anybody else in the community notice? And if the answer is, I don't know, or no, you should probably change the way you're doing ministry. And so, all to say, I love this idea. So the example he gives in a company that subverted that and why they were so successful is Apple. And when you look at the early marketing of like when Apple really started to succeed was when Steve Jobs came back, is when you look at their commercials. If you looked at like a Microsoft commercial, they would say, you know, here's this new computer we've designed and it's got all these new features and it's been updated to this new Windows operating system.
Right.
And you're going to love it.
And then you go to Apple and it's all about being creative, being different.
Yes.
Think different. I think that was their
so you
logo
already know
for a
all
while.
this. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
And there was that one Super Bowl commercial that if you didn't know it was Apple.
In the dystopia.
Yeah, the dystopian thing. And then they throw the fire thing at the brilliant commercial. It's one of the most iconic. So another good example. And I'm extremely biased to this brand because I use way too much of their stuff and get made fun of by my friends. It's Yeti. But if you go look at Yeti's marketing, they rarely ever have just blatant, this is a product that we make. What they do, like go to their YouTube page, it's incredible. They have short films about people who happen to use Yeti products, and it's about what they do. So it's about a guy who's fishing. It's about somebody who is a very competitive, rowing person who competes in that. It's about somebody who is a hunter or like just little things that you would happen to use something like a Yeti, and they just tell their stories. And occasionally you happen to see a Yeti product in there. And I think that's the most brilliant marketing because they're never shoving the product in your face. They're saying, here's who uses it and here's what they do. And if you happen to be interested in that, they have a film festival where it's just like the Yeti films. Like one of them, some of them have won like major awards and stuff. Like it's a really cool marketing thing.
You should tag Yeti in this video. They should hire you to promote their stuff.
I would love if Yeti would sponsor me and hire me.
I mean, you're so right. And Sinek's whole point is that people buy why you do what you do. They buy who you are, not what you do, not what you sell. And I think that's where you were so right on Apple. And that's his whole point is like, if you like to buck trends, if you like to think differently, if you think of yourself as a creative out of the box, you're not a corporate stooge who works in a cubicle, you're creative, that's what the marketing is meant to draw you into. And so there's the same question I think should be applied to the church and to say, who do we want to attract to Creekwood? Because you need to have a target market. That doesn't mean the church isn't open to everybody, but there's a specific kind of person that you are more likely to encounter in this area that you want to reach out to. So who are we really trying to reach out to? Because that changes how you spend your money, how you staff, the programs that you do, the style of worship you have, the lighting level, the volume level, like everything plays out into who is our target audience? And
absolutely.
A lot of people hate that idea because it's marketing language and they think that the church should be for everybody, and the church is for everybody. Not every church is for every person.
No.
If I walk into a church and it's exclusively 80-year-old people and there's nobody my age there, I'm probably not going to enjoy it. Similarly, if I walk into a church and it's a bunch of 20-year-olds, I'm going to say, nah, I don't want to. There's nobody here in my life stage. So like not every church is for everybody. Some churches have a very specific theological leaning. Some of them have a very specific political leaning or stylistic leaning or whatever. And I think that just being honest about that, you have it, whether you want to admit it or not. Every church has an identity, and it's not aimed at every human being. It doesn't mean it's not open and welcoming to everybody, but you do some things really well. And the churches that I see that do the most good and flourish the most, they focus, they specialize, they know what they do well, and they don't try to be what they're not.
Yeah, you can't be everything to everyone.
You can't.
And
even if you want to be,
lyric.
even the biggest churches in the world are not everything to everyone.
Well, so this all lands on one word, and that's identity.
Yeah.
So who are you? You being Creekwood, and then for us to have a very firm, very pointed, specific even answer to that question.
Right.
Who are you? Which church are you? What does your church do? Who is your church? And so identity is the answer to the question, where do we go next?
Well, and it's funny because sometimes you make that super obvious. Like Saddleback is this massive church
Oh,
that
yeah,
Rick Warren
of
started in California. And they literally had like a drawing of, I think his name was Saddleback Sam. And it was like the average, I mean, at the time, this was, I think, in the 80s. And it was like, this is the average yuppie that's moving into this part of California. And that's who we're targeting. It was literally like a drawing of a person.
That's
like,
funny.
This is typically what they dress like. This is their life stage. This is their age. This is, they have this number of kids. They usually live in these neighborhoods. They usually have these kind of jobs. Like, they narrowed their target audience down to like a very specific demographic. Now, I think that's going a little far. A lot of churches I've worked in will have multiple kind of target demos that they're working with.
Right.
But you've got to identify it.
Right. Well, I think it's funny you say that because I think of Saddleback Church as the Celebrate Recovery Church. That's where Celebrate Recovery started.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, they changed over their years.
Right.
But, like, when they first started, like, that's who Rick was going after. And it worked.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'm not saying that should be replicated in that way, but
Well,
I
not
think
everybody can just... Because you can learn every single step that a church took to get to what we would deem successful point in the life of that church. And... whether you can mathematically pinpoint all the points of success or not does not mean that you will replicate it because it's more centered around who's around you, who are the people, and that's where I think every church should honestly start. Like, well, who's actually going to come here? Then what do they need, and then who are they?
Yeah, and it makes it a lot easier to like. To dig into that vision and to commit to it. And so like, that's what this Sunday's sermon was all about, is we're doing our commitment cards this Sunday, committing to the future of the church, our budget for this next year, how we're going to personally invest in that. So our church can invest in these things. And that's a part of discipleship in general. It's a part of the church existing in general, but that gets so much easier. And I don't mean easier to sell. I mean easier to want to be a part of it. If you are inspired by something, you want to be a part of it.
Of course.
And the more specific and creative and intentional that feels, the more you want to be a part of it. And so that's where I think I've watched a lot of churches struggle to raise money and make ends meet and pay their bills, is they don't have that inspirational vision. They don't have that North Star. It's just sort of like, well, we need you to give because otherwise we won't exist. Well, that's more of a threat. You don't mean it that way, but you've only really described the consequences of me not doing it. You have not told me what is the benefit, what impact is my time and money going to have, so that I know it's worth investing it here. Time is precious. Money is precious. If I'm going to give you a lot of either one of those, I want to know that it's going to do something. And it's not that I don't trust you. It's that if the church is not doing anything, if it's just kind of existing to exist and not really doing anything, I can understand why people say, I don't know that I really want to invest here.
Well, it goes back to that question, like defend your right to be here.
Yeah. And I think the more you can have that, the more likely you are to actually achieve your goals if you set them and if you created a plan for how to get there, and then you can get people to rally behind it, and then you can celebrate those victories. And so, I mean, you've got to do all of those steps. And I think that's the other side of this, is you have to identify exactly what you're trying to be, by when, and for what purpose. Because that's where, when we had our listening groups back in August or whatever, when we first got here, I heard almost every group say, like, we want growth, either in the church, in my Sunday school, in the choir, in youth and children, like wherever that manifested, almost everybody wanted programs in the church to grow. What I didn't ask at the time, because it wasn't the right time, now it is to say, when you say you want it to grow, to what? So if we average about 315 on Sunday mornings right now, what do you want that average to be? It can't be 3,000 because this physical property won't support it. We can't put enough parking spaces in for that. We would have to physically relocate.
Oh, yeah.
So do you want to be that big more than you want to be in this location? I would say most people would say no because of how sacred this property is.
This property is so much part of the identity of
It
Creekwood,
absolutely
and
is.
it should be, and that's part of it.
So I think that's the other answer is like you've got to put metrics behind it so that you know when you're successful because you just want to grow forever. Nothing can grow forever.
No.
And then you feel like a failure when it stops or when it slows down. And so I think identifying what do we mean when we say grow, across what timeline, and to what end? Just because something is bigger doesn't mean it's better.
It's actually funny to look at some of the churches that were like the dominant forces in the world of church, specifically in North Texas, 20 years ago. And, when I was in college and then looking at them now, and some of them are just, when I say a shell of what they were, it is like, what happened? And then some of them are just, they're still doing their thing. They changed to nothing. They just kind of, I guess, caught lightning in a bottle and then ran with it. And then they've just kind of come back down. COVID kind of helped with that, some of that. And then some of them just straight up don't exist anymore.
And a lot of that can be the fault of the church.
Sure.
And some of it is like just maybe the area changed and they didn't change with it.
Right.
The first church I worked at, in the 90s, they were over 1,000 in worship. By the time I was there, they were down in like the 400s. And I think today, like, I don't know if they're cracking 100. Wow. And so over the course of like crazy. 20 to 30 years to go from 1,000 to 100. Now, that area went through a very big demographic shift, and the church in many ways did not change or adapt to that. And so that's a part of it. But it also starts to snowball because, like, crowds draw crowds. Like people want to go where the people are.
A crowd.
Yeah. But if an empty building is tough.
Yep.
If you walk into a sanctuary that seats 800 people and there's 80 people in there, you're going to feel.
You kind of feel like,
why am I here? This place is dead.
Yeah.
It's not great. And that's, I mean, sometimes too, like what kind of a church do you want to be? Because like some people love smaller churches because they
can make a bigger impact.
Everybody. When you walk in, everyone's going to know you're new.
Yeah.
And you're like, yes, I want to make friendships and relationships. I want to know everybody and I want to be involved. So you're looking for that. Some people want a medium-sized church where like maybe it's not going to be super obvious on their first day, but they can get to know most of the church.
Yeah.
It's kind of Creekwood size. And some people want to walk into a church where they can be completely anonymous and they just want to they want to go to a super high quality church that has 1 million programs and they'll get to know people on their terms and they want the ability to be anonymous. And people have different reasons for why they want all three of those. But I think that's where churches often aren't intentional or even aware of who they are, who they want to be, and why. And a lot of times you'll set goals simply for the sake of more. We want to be bigger. We want to have more people. But
more for the sake of more is never a good reason to do anything. So,
and if you're not, and this is something that I heard in a really great sermon on stewardship years ago, one of my colleagues gave about, it has to do with, there's a scripture that talks about like, if you're faithful with a little, you'll be trusted with a lot. And essentially the pastor, she was saying that a lot of people will come up to her and say, I just don't make very much money right now. I'm in my first career, but like once I get like a better job, I'll be able to give more. And she said, that's very rarely true. If you don't give now, you won't give when you have more. And statistically, when you look at people's giving, the more money they make, the lower their percentage of giving is. They might give more money in a dollar amount, but usually like the percent of their income that is reflected by that usually drops with the more money they give because people are drawn to a dollar amount. They think in dollar amounts, not in percents of their income.
Right.
And so it doesn't grow proportionally. And that's tough and all that. And so I think it's the same thing that applies to church growth and visioning and mechanics in there is you want to be bigger. Well, why? Well, so we can be effective. Well, if you're not effective now,
you're not going to be
not going to be effective when you're bigger. You're just going to be bigger. And do you want to be bigger so you can accomplish a goal or do you want to be bigger for your ego? Do you want to be bigger because you think that's what you're supposed to do, but not necessarily? I mean, like,
you could say that there are plenty of movies that, made $200 million in their opening weekend and they were not good movies. Right. And then there are movies that are some of the best movies I've ever seen that were in limited theaters and maybe made $10 million in their entire run. And yet these are the movies that are going to stick with you and change you and make an impact. So it comes down to, are you just trying to make a movie that's going to get butts in seats, right, or are you trying to make a movie that's going to change people's lives? And I would prefer to be the latter.
Are you just trying to make money, or are you? And that's why you see today, I mean, so much of the IP, it's all recycled and sequels, and it's pre-existing IP because that's safe. Investors know there's already a desire for that.
But somebody who's going to try to do something new, something that's going to change people, make people think, it's risky. But man, when it hits, the payoff is there.
Yeah, and it is fun when you see like a super low budget movie that just like
blew your mind,
billions of dollars.
I love it. Anyway, all right. Well, this is a long one. I like it. So, identity.
Who are we?
We get to answer that question.
We'll see. Yeah, what's what we're working on. But first, we're going to try to get through the rest of the series this Sunday. Don't forget your commitment cards. We'll have extras for you if you need it.
And if you're watching this in June, sorry, you missed it.
That's right. Come back next year. But no, I think that, committing to the vision has to happen. And I think that's on both sides. Like, people have to be willing to buy in and be willing to invest their passion and their time. They've got to talk about this. They've got to want to pull towards accomplishing a goal, but we have to have one. Yeah. So I think like we have some, it's like we don't have anything right now, but I think we have an opportunity now that the season of COVID is done. We're entering into a new life, being debt-free, where we really, in addition to the ongoing goals that each kind of ministry area has, I think trying to create some big thing we can all pull towards is really exciting. I don't know what it is. It's not like, and now we're going to reveal it in 2 weeks. Like, I don't know what it is. And it's not going to come from me. It's going to come from all of us together. But I think that's kind of ours to do over the next year.
Love it. I can't wait. Hey, this was episode 50.
50.
Wow. 50.
Okay.
So
that's a lot.
That's a lot. We're getting there. It's a big deal. All right. Thanks for hanging out with us. Look in the mirror. Who are we? Catch you next time.
See y'all.
Peace.